Welcome back. Now, if you're one of those guys who are still sticking with this series, still sticking with this video, you're one of the lucky ones because I've figured out some crazy cool stuff and I'm gonna present this to you in this talk. Now, first of all, some basics. It is now 14 o'clock. I got another measurement in at 12 o'clock. I came in at 61.1 kilograms at 7.8% body fat. So we'll probably crack the 61 kilograms during this dry fast, which is pretty insane because since I stepped on a scale, I never measured this low of a body weight on my body, basically, okay? So that's gonna be a pretty cool result of this 50-hour dry fast. We're gonna see how it goes. Also, what I did is I measured of course I took a piss again at 12 o'clock and I measured the weight of this urine again. I didn't measure the ketones because we know already that we are in full ketosis. It wouldn't make any sense to waste another ketone strip, to check again that there are ketones, okay? We're probably gonna start measuring again when we come off the fast to see when we actually switch back into normal metabolism, kicking ourselves out of ketosis. Now, before I'm gonna elaborate a little bit more about the scientific backgrounds of dry fasting, when we want to call it like that, I would like to make a little bit of a clarification. First of all, why am I actually doing this crazy freaking 50-hour dry fast? Someone was pointing out in the comments of the previous episode, of episode 1, I think, of Mission 8B, that he's not quite sure if this is a good strategy. It would have been better to probably refeed on Friday evening and then rest all Saturday and refeed on Saturday evening as well and then crush on Sunday. Now, this is a classic OMAD approach, a one meal a day approach. You're eating one meal and then you're making a big intermittent fast, so to say, and then you're eating again your one meal in a tight eating window once a day. Now, the thing is, why did I pick the 50-hour dry fast above OMAD? Because I have to agree here, actually. Probably from a pure performance standpoint, OMAD would have been a little bit better. Why? Because you can still lose weight on OMAD, but you get a few calories in. It's especially important on Friday evening because I need these calories to regenerate from these crazy 2 sessions that I did the days before on Thursday and Friday. Okay, so we didn't get these calories in. I didn't eat anything on Friday evening anymore. I fasted already there like 24 hours, okay? So why did I do that? Simply because I'm actually not so much out for the performance gains of the fast, which are gonna be somewhat present because, as I said, I'm gonna be light as hell, but I'm gonna be probably also a little bit weaker, I admit that, on Sunday than I would have been if I would have eaten something. Now we're gonna see what's more important, being stronger or being lighter. As we know, with climbing, body weight is extremely important, so we're gonna see how that acts on performance. But there's also some other gains that come with fasting, and especially dry fasting. Now, I wanted to break my dry fasting record, which is at the moment 45 hours. I wanted to increase it to 50 hours. This is simply a move of confidence, It's just cool to say, to be able to say, I dry fasted for longer than 2 days, because a normal person on the street will tell you, a human cannot live without water for 2 days. You're gonna die. Which is, of course, complete bullshit, okay? I don't know why this believing is so present in modern times, but it's not true. Simply, if you have all your organs and you're a healthy human being, you can easily sustain a 50-hour dry fast, especially if you're fat. I mean, if I can do it starting with like 9% body fat, okay? There's people out there with 20% body fat, man, they can dry fast for 100 hours probably. Probably even I can dry fast for 100 hours. But, step by step, you're increasing your capabilities. You can train fasting, actually, okay? I'm pretty sure that you can train this process. Back in the caveman days, we didn't eat all the time 3 times a day as well, okay? These people probably went for a hunt and then they pigged out 2 times a week or something, and the rest of the days they basically fasted, or at least this is how I can imagine it, okay? So this is a little bit of a thing, this starts a little bit of a thinking process, because we might have evolved in this lifestyle in such a way that we now maybe even need the fast, to boost up the healing of the body, actually, to not strain our digestive system, to not stress our digestive system again with food. Now, giving it a rest, you know, giving your whole body a rest to let it heal and stuff. So this is kind of the health benefits, the supposed health benefits of fasting, and especially dry fasting. Now, before we get into that in a little bit more detail, this is one of the reasons why I picked the dry fast essentially over OMAD. Okay, OMAD is easy. OMAD is easy. 1 meal a day. You can even get fat on 1 meal a day easily. Okay, I already tried OMAD. It's not bad. It's not bad, definitely. But the self-development gains that you will get from dry fasting are definitely much more significant. Now, now I want to get into something. Remember when I said I need to distract myself from the fact that I'm hungry as frick? As you can see here, distraction, guitar playing, reading, And I didn't do any of these stuff so far, but I geeked out a little bit on science and calculated a few things, and these I would like to present here for you. And this is in the context of metabolic water. A lot of people have asked me, hey Manny, how can you say that you're getting lighter during a session, for example, okay? I always mention this in my conditioning episodes, basically, how I almost never drink something during a session, you know, during a climbing session, or I drink very little, comparably little to my peers, but I'm still pissing constantly water. Now, and clear, you know? So how can that be? How can I still have so much fluid in my body but without drinking anything? Now the reason, of course, for that is metabolic water. And that's what I want to get into here with this little presentation. So let's pull this here up a little bit. Beautiful. Now, you gotta understand that when you burn our macronutrients that we are used to as human beings. Now, I'm gonna take a look at fats and carbs here especially, but the same is basically true for protein. It's just a little bit more complicated. But let's take a look at carbs here. We have here the net equation for glucose metabolism. Glucose is a carbohydrate, as you know probably. Here we have the chemical formula of glucose. As you can see, we have 1 molecule of glucose here, plus 6 molecules of oxygen, of molecular oxygen, gets converted to 6 molecules of CO2 and 6 molecules of water. So as you can see, we didn't start with water here, okay? We started with carbohydrates and oxygen. Now, when you take a look at the name of carbohydrates, then you're gonna get a hint what this molecule is all about, okay? It's carbon, but it's also hydrated. It's hydrated carbon. And as you can see, when you're looking exactly, we've got 6 carbon atoms here in one glucose molecule, 12 hydrogen atoms, and 6 oxygen atoms. So this here, this part of the glucose is actually 6 pieces of water when you take a look at it. So that's why these are called carbohydrates, okay? Now what's happening here, we're burning this with 6 molecules of oxygen and we're creating 6 CO2. The CO2 of course is breathed out, as we said before, and we're creating 6 molecules of water. And of course energy, okay? We can see here that 1 mole of glucose has 2,870 kilojoules of energy, or in other words, 3.8 kilocalories per gram of glucose. Now, kilocalories is the usual term. Everybody's calling kilocalories calories, basically. So we are gonna go with that as well. These are calories. 3.8 calories per gram of glucose when combusted, okay? Now, what does that mean when combusted? It's a difference if you ingest something and burn it inside your body, or you throw it in something that's called a bomb calorimeter, where they simply burn that stuff and then they measure how much energy is freed by burning that stuff. They measure that they've got a piece of water surrounding this explosion, so to say, and then they simply measure how much this water heats up while this stuff got burned, okay? Now, 1 calorie is the energy that is needed to heat 1 gram of water, I believe, for 1 grade Celsius. So that's just to put this into perspective, okay? 3.8 kilocalories per gram of glucose. Now, this counts for Carbohydrate metabolism. Now essentially we burn, why is glucose so representative for carbohydrates? When we have glycogen, for example, in our muscles, that's essentially lots of glucose molecules connected to each other, okay? When we eat rice, that starch is also a lot of glucose molecules connected with each other. So glucose is here really representative for carbohydrates. There are also other carbohydrates with fructose and stuff like that, for example. Then this equation looks a bit different. But this is kind of a good thing to get it in the understanding, okay? 6 molecules of water here, just popping out of the nothing basically via burning carbs. Now here is the net equation for fat metabolism. Here we have 1 molecule of fatty acid, and this is, to be exact, palmitic acid. This is the most common saturated fatty acid in animals, okay? So it is kind of, when we talked about glucose before, is kind of representative for fatty acids in the human body. Now that's kind of practical. Let's take a look at how this is burned. Now, the only thing that I knew basically was the chemical formula for palmitic acid. I didn't know the rest, but when you know that you want to burn it with oxygen and the so to say outcoming compounds are CO2 and H2O, you can complete this formula on your own by simply checking if all the single atoms add up to each other, okay? So what you're seeing on this side of the equation, the number of atoms has to be the same number of atoms like on this side of the equation. And when you back check this, I'm not going to do this now because it takes a little bit of time, but when you back check this, then you will figure out that it's correct. But I didn't get this from the internet. Maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe you find a mistake. In case that's the case, please correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments below. Now again, here is of course energy freed just when we burn glucose. And to be exact, we've got 10,031 kilojoules per mole of palmitic acid, or in other words, 9.3 calories per gram of palmitic acid when combusted, okay? When thrown in a bomb calorimeter and burned. This is something different than when you eat it, okay? That's important. Now, let's take a look at these conclusions that we have here. As you can see, we're producing here some metabolic water as well. And this is 16 molecules of metabolic water compared to only 6 molecules of metabolic water when we burn sugar. Now that's quite significant, okay? But another thing that's significant is that we've got 9.3 calories per gram palmitic acid compared to 3.8 calories of gram glucose. Now when we take a look at this here, at this chemical formula for palmitic acid, then we're gonna see that there are a shitload of carbon atoms here actually because of these 14 number here compared to the sugar, but not so many oxygens. For every carbon atom in sugar, there is an oxygen atom present, okay? In palmitic acid, this is not the case, which is the reason why carbs are much heavier than fats, okay? Because oxygen is a heavy element. Hydrogen is quite light, is the lightest element of them all, okay? So this is why fats are so light, but despite that contain so much energy because they contain so many carbon atoms. And carbon atoms can be burned with oxygen to create CO2 and water. So the conclusions of these two formulas here is basically it takes almost 4 times as much oxygen to burn 1 molecule of fatty acid compared to burning 1 molecule of glucose, as you can see here. Now, 1 molecule of fatty acid creates almost 3 times as much metabolic water when burned compared to 1 molecule of glucose. Now this is the camel effect, or this is something that explains the camel effect. Let's put it that way. What is the camel effect? Have you ever wondered why camels don't store water simply in their back? They store fat in their back, right? Why don't they simply, I mean, they need water in the desert, right? But it's much smarter to actually store fat, because you know what? In the atmosphere there's so much oxygen around, you can create water with fat and oxygen very easily inside of your body by simply burning the fat off, okay? And that's how camels actually survive long distances in the desert. They simply burn the fat off and with oxygen basically creating CO2 and metabolic water inside of their body. And fat is a lot lighter than water, okay? Fat contains energy compared to water. So fat is here really a powerhouse when it comes to that. So that's the camel effect. Now, here's another one. Fat contains more than double the amount of calories per unit of mass compared to carbohydrates. We see this here. 3.8 kilograms of kilocalories per gram of glucose compared to 9.3 kilocalories of palmitic per gram of palmitic acid. Okay, so that's more than double. Now, when we take a look at all the advantages of fats here, the question really arises. I hope you can see that still. Oh, it's a little bit light here. Okay, I'm gonna maybe make it a little bit darker. I hope you can see this still. Wait, I'm getting it up here a little bit. That's looking good. So the question really arises here: why carbs? Why do we even have carbs? You know, because storing carbohydrates, you gotta think about that. Storing, from a biological point of view, storing fats is easy. Because when you push fats together, you get this kind of squishy substance that can move around. You know, it's almost like a fluid, almost like an oil that you can easily carry on your fat freaking gut, you know, carry it around and burn it whenever you need it. It's quite lightweight. You can do a lot of other stuff with it as well. You can produce hormones, you can produce cell walls, you can produce all kinds of shit with this stuff, okay? So the question really arises, why do we actually also eat carbs or like to eat carbs? Now the reason, because we need carbs, or at least our species is also very carb adapted, and this is what I've preached like years ago already. This is because burning carbs is a lot easier and goes a lot quicker than burning fats. We know this when we take long endurance sports, for example. When you do long endurance sports like running and cycling and all this stuff, like ultra endurance, you know, 100 kilometers and stuff, then you're not in an intensity where you need carbohydrates, okay? The moves are very repetitive and it's very endurance based sports, yeah? In these cases, you can actually almost solely run on fats. And the problem arises when you are training like power sports, okay? Some max power forces, like for example climbing. When you crank down a crimp full gas 100%, like for example when you're hanging for 2 seconds on the hangboard, then you're not burning one fat molecule at all. I mean, probably you're burning in the background fat molecules as well. But this quick energy actually comes from carbs, from a process called glycolysis, okay? And there is also a distinction between anaerobic and aerobic glycolysis. Anaerobic glycolysis is even faster and is more relevant when it comes to power endurance. I made a video back then about this already, so you can check it out when you're interested in that. But anyway, to keep it short and simple, carbs are the quicker molecule here when it comes to energy creation in the animal body. It's like throwing 1 kilogram of paper onto your bonfire, okay? It's gonna light up super quickly and create a ton of energy rapidly, then compared to throwing a log of wood that's 1 kilogram onto your bonfire, okay? It has to be heated up first with the flames, and you know what I'm saying? This is differently accessible for your enzymes, for your energy creating enzymes, and fats are here slower. And that's why we can taste sweetness, okay? If carbs wouldn't be necessary for us, we wouldn't be able to taste sweetness, the sweetness of sugar. We wouldn't be able to test the nice satiatedness of carbohydrates, longer chain carbohydrates. So to take this argument like for ketosis, permanent ketosis is in my opinion wrong. Fats have a very important role in the human body as well, and especially when it comes to quick available energy. So that's why also I believe that you will never be able to pull off the athletic performance in a power-based sport in ketosis, in permanent ketosis, okay? And people who claim that they are so ketosis adapted and now they can pull the same results, they could probably be even stronger if they threw in also some carbohydrates, okay? Now, it depends on the sport. As I said, for some cyclists, it might be true that it can almost go for the same results in ketosis. But anyway, now we've explained the phenomenon basically of metabolic water and how this is important for athletic performance, because when you're doing a lot of climbing, for example, during a session and you're not really drinking a lot, or you're doing a lot of dry fasting like I'm doing now and you're not really drinking a lot, I mean you're drinking zero, I still create metabolic water inside of my body, which allows me to stay alive. And yeah, via this process basically, via burning off my fats. And as you can see, fats burn a lot, create a lot of metabolic water, okay? So now the question arises, and now it's getting really interesting actually. Can we calculate how much fat, respectively calories, I burn in dry fasted ketosis from this formula up here? Yes, we can actually, but only under the following assumptions. First, my whole body runs on 100% fat. This is not true, of course, because we still got in the background probably something going on that's called glyconeogenesis, where carbohydrates are regenerated from amino acids actually, because as I said before, my brain likes sugars, okay? The brain likes to run on sugars, so even in complete ketosis, your body still creates sugar out of its amino acids via gluconeogenesis to run the brain, and also I think some tissue close to the kidneys is also running almost solely on sugars as well, but that's very small, so that's kind of negligible. But also, we probably somewhere inside of my body there are still some residual carbs present that still get burned. Now the problem is here we cannot know how much percent of my energy is coming from fat right now and how much from gluconeogenesis, for example. How could we know? That's the question. How could we know? So let's take a look at this formula again from before. Hope you can see that. We could actually measure the relation between breathed out CO2 and breathed in O2. Because as you can see, when you are running purely on carbohydrates, you are breathing out just the same amount of moles CO2 like the amount of moles of O2 that you're breathing in. It's according to this formula. As you can see, 6 O2 get turned into 6 CO2, and that's what I said previously in my previous shot where I wasn't kind of sure if that's still correct. Still was there in the back of my head from my biology study, I think, but yeah, anyway, that's how you could find that out. If this relation is the same as 1-to-1, then you're running on carbs. If this relation is much more higher towards oxygen, as you can see when we're burning fats, we need much more oxygen per molecule of breathed out CO2, okay? As you can see, we're breathing in 23 moles of oxygen for breathing out only 16 moles of CO2. Now, there are actually machines which can track how much oxygen you're breathing in and how much CO2 you're breathing out. And this way they can find out on which kind of energy source your body is running at the moment, okay? But of course I don't have this machine, which means that we have to go with the assumption that my whole body runs on 100% fat at the moment, which should be kind of close, because as we know, I'm in full ketosis at the moment, okay? Secondly, the burnt fat is 100% palmitic acid. Now, of course, that's not true. There are other fats as well in our body, although a palmitic acid is the dominant one, the one that's most occurring here. There are also other fats, but the problem is, again, we cannot know. It's very hard to ever know, actually, even when if you have such a machine, okay? Because, of course, these chemical reactions here look a little bit different from in other fats, but but not a lot actually. They are always somewhat similar, and there are so many different fats in our body, saturated, unsaturated. They undergo different processes and all end up in CO2 and metabolic water. So it's really hard to distinct these. But I'm gonna calculate with the palmitic acid formula, okay, with the palmitic acid equation. So that's point number 2, and point number 3 is actually the most important one, and that is urine is 100% metabolic water. Now that's not true either, of course, because in urine we've got dissolved salts, we've got urea, uric acid, ketones, of course, because we're in full ketosis. And all these things contribute to the weight of the urine which we took via these samples as well. Now we cannot know, we would need to analyze the urine and see how much sodium is in there, how much potassium and all that stuff, you know. So we cannot know really how much percentage of the urine is actually metabolic water. And also, what's even more important, broken down fat cells and other stuff contains lots of water which is set free and might be pissed out as well, but is not metabolic water. Okay, when you're breaking down fat in your body, you're also letting loose water, because fat cells do not contain 100%. Guess what? They actually contain about maybe like 60 or 50% fat, and the rest is water, which is getting set free as well as you burning the fat cells off. And this is of course something that you can piss out as well. Nobody knows if that's also metabolic water. Now, when we take all these things aside, okay, we put this aside, we assume that the ideal that my urine is 100% metabolic water, which is all not true, and all these other assumptions are all true as well, even though they are not. Our net equation for palmitic acid is here again. We convert 1 molecule of palmitic acid with 23 moles of O2 to 16 moles of CO2 and 16 moles of H2O. Now, and energy, of course. What do we know of this equation? We know the water, okay? That's the only thing we know, basically, because we know how much I pissed out, simple as that. And that is 160 grams of piss plus 132 grams of piss. This is basically the measurement that I had from 9 o'clock in the morning and from 12 o'clock. Added to each other is 292 grams of piss. Let's round that down to 290 grams of piss. Let's say that's the salt in the urine. We don't want to take this into account. And this is what we pissed in 8 hours. 290 grams of urine. Now, the question here is now 290 grams of H2O. How many moles H2O is that? For this, we have to look up the molar mass of H2O, which is 18 grams per mole. Now, I've got this simply from the internet, okay? You can simply Google that. That's pretty much exactly, it's around 18 grams per mole. Now, when we now divide this by 290 divided by 18 grams per mole, 290 grams, we can cross out the grams out of this beautiful equation here. Then we get out 16.1, or let's say roughly 16 moles of H2O. Well, that's practical. Well, when we take a look at our formula, we've got 16 moles of H2O standing on the right side of our calculation here, of our equation here already. So that means that I pretty much burned, let's look at this side of the equation, 1 mole of palmitic acid. Because when there is only one name basically, or one formula for one molecule present, then this means pretty much that there is a 1 at the beginning, okay? This means 1 mole of palmitic acid. 16 moles of water, 1 mole palmitic acid. So I burned 1 mole of palmitic acid in 8 hours. That's kind of practical. Now, the question is, how much energy does 1 mole of palmitic acid contain? That's 10,031 kilojoules, as we know from here. This is basically the energy. It got dark here real much. I'm gonna turn on the light here a little bit more. As you can see, that's 10,031 kilojoules per mole of palmitic acid, or in other words, 9.3 calories per gram of palmitic acid. Now that means when we divide this by 8 hours, 1,253.9 kilojoules per hour burned. Now we're gonna look up how much that actually is in calories. Now, 1 mole of palmitic acid burned in 8 hours, From the internet we know 1 kilojoule is around 0.239 calories. So now it's a simple, because that's a pretty simple calculation here, 1253.9 times 0.239, and then we get a pretty nice number, and that is 300 calories per hour. So according to the, oh my god, now I'm super light again. So I hope you can see that here. I'm gonna show it to you again. 1 mole of palmitic acid burned in 8 hours. From the internet we know that 1 kilojoule is 0.239 calories, and that adds up to 300 calories per hour. And this is basal metabolic rate, actually, okay? Because I'm resting now, I'm not doing anything, I'm just fasting basically. So we can say 300 calories per hour times 24, then you get the basal metabolic rate for a day, and this actually comes up to 7,200 calories per day, basic metabolic rate. Now that's a hell lot, okay? Probably the basal metabolic rate for a person like me would be much closer to like 2,000 calories per day. Now, how did we come out with such a high value? Now again, we had these assumptions here. The most important assumption, which probably plays a role in this calculation here, is number 3. Urine is 100% metabolic water, which is not true. Probably even half of the urine, or even more, is not metabolic water. It's actually water that got broken loose by burning of fat cells. The other possibility is that I'm actually firing out gluconeogenesis like crazy, and actually I'm creating half of my metabolic water here, not via the burning down of fats, but via the burning down of glucose that came up with gluconeogenesis. I hope this is not true, because that would mean that I'm burning muscle like crazy at the moment. And actually I know that this is not true, because fasting like this, especially dry fasting, is actually very muscle sparing. So what this tells us essentially is that over half of the water that I pissed out with my urine is not metabolic water, is actually just constructive water of fat cells, or I would call it like that, you know, that gets to break loose when we burn the fat off. So that's metabolic water explained, and that's dry fasting explained. Now, I hope that was somehow interesting for you. We can also derive some other advantages of dry fasting from this little equation here. I'm gonna let it into the screen in case you want to back check anything, but I'm gonna keep talking here like crazy. Holy shit, it's gonna be a long segment, 30 minutes, poo. Now anyway, the thing is, when you're dry fasting, your body needs water, okay? It's gonna look for water. It's gonna take a look in your body and see what are unnecessary cells. Are there some cancer cells? Are there some viruses? Are there some bacterial cells? Is there any cellular waste that we can get rid of and burn off to create even that more metabolic water, okay? Your body is looking for water, and on its way, of course, it firstly burns off the fat, because that's what gives him the most metabolic water, not only because of metabolic water, but also because of constructive water, as we've just found out via this calculation here, okay? Now, but additionally, and this is especially true if you're dry fasting, because you're not giving your body water. Your body is forced to produce this water on its own. And that means that your body is carefully selecting out cells that are a little bit damaged, that are not, you know, your body is really chewing up everything that's not necessary but still resides in your body, from fungi, bacteria, virals, cancer cells, and whatnot stuff, okay? That's the theory behind the health of fasting in general, also of water fasting. Now, the problem with water fasting, with plain water fasting, is that you're pissing out your electrolytes, okay? Especially if you're drinking tap water. That's why usually experienced fasters fast with salt water when they do a prolonged water fast. or they fast dry. Because when you fast dry, you're pissing out so little volume that your kidneys are still able to reabsorb a lot of these minerals and still keep you in kind of a healthy state, you know. Just like I'm sitting here, we're now over 40 hours in dry fasted and I'm still functioning quite well actually. So these are the health benefits of dry fasting. Your body is essentially chewing up all the unnecessary shit in it. Now, when we take a look at the mental aspects of fasting, then it's getting really interesting as well. Because guess what? After 50 hours dry fasted, your tiny little bitches first world problems become nothing, okay? They're gonna get eradicated out of your life. The only thing that you're valuing after 50 hours dry fasted is water, okay? That's the only thing you can think of. You are thirsty as fuck, your mouth is dry. You're not caring about your little Facebook or your little Instagram or whatnot, okay? All these first world stuff that's nowadays there. And this is the beauty of the mental aspect of dry fasting. You know, it really redirects your value compass towards real values. Now, what is a real value? Water is a real value. Food is a real value, okay? That's what your body really needs to stay alive, to survive. And after 15 hours of abstaining from that stuff, you're gonna crave it like crazy, and you're gonna, when you're taking your first sip of water after 50 hours dry fast, it's gonna be an amazing feeling, okay? So these are the mental aspects of dry fasting that I just wanted to throw out here, and I'm by far not an expert. I don't have a lot of experience. I have a little bit of experience, but I can definitely say that I feel these things as well. You know, even when I'm in the city, for example, and now dry fasted, I have to stay at home almost, okay? Because when I go out, there is a lot of noise. There's a lot of unconsciousness, simply a lot of people making noise and talking about unnecessary stuff. You have no concentration for this stuff in this stage, okay? You cannot, you're getting reduced on pure common sense, on real values, okay? If something has a real value, then it's gonna be important for you still in a dry fast. If it's not important to you, you're gonna kick it out of your life. And this is also why I like to clean up and stuff when I'm fasting, okay? Because it's such a good way to simplify your life. If you not even need food and water anymore, okay, what do you need anyway, you know? So this is really the pinnacle of simplicity of, I would say, how do they call it nowadays? Minimalism, okay? This minimalism, I'm a minimalist, I need so little stuff. This is the pinnacle of minimalism, not even needing food anymore, okay? Not even needing water anymore, for fuck's sake. Man. But anyway, so much for the mental aspects of dry fasting. I'm gonna get into this maybe with another video. Now this segment got really, really long, but it's really, really interesting maybe to some people. So I think I might even make a separate upload of this little talk here. That I'm gonna add, so to say, as a little bit of a bonus footage to the episode 3, to day 3 of the dry fast. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed my work here, learned a little bit about biochemistry. It was fun to do this stuff again. Maybe I should pick up the biology studies again, but it's so boring, the master, I tell you. This is the stuff that you learn in the bachelor, actually, you know, when you do chemics and stuff. Really interesting stuff, really useful stuff that you can need for your own experiments as well. But then it's getting much too specific and it's not getting interesting anymore. That's another subject. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I think I'm gonna upload this separately. Have a great one, basically.